Hello and welcome. My name is Raz Kaur, and I am going to be talking to you about how you can improve your code quality using code analysis tools. I am the test lead of Visual Studio Code Analysis, and I met a lot of people over the past few days who say, Visual Studio Code Analysis, that's kind of cool. What is it? And I say, have you heard of Prefast or FXCOP? And they're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. So some of you may know us as Prefast and FXCOP, and we are the Visual Studio Code Analysis tools. A quick show of hands. Anybody here heard of and used Prefast FXCOP on a regular basis? Awesome. I have got all of you. I'm coming back for feedback. And for the rest of you, hope by the end of this, you'd be wanting to go and use it. A little bit about myself. I've been with the team for about 5 years, and I actually really like what I do. And the reason is that the tools help make millions of lines of code better and in time for it to actually make a difference. So that's what I'm here to share, and let me begin. So how many of you have read a review like this before? This product is flaky. You all read reviews before you go and buy stuff? Yeah, I do. I've even written one like this before. Well, the feature set was great. It looked very compelling. But the moment I tried to use it, it felt flaky. It started crashing, didn't quite function the way I expected it to. Now, if the quality was great, I would have loved it. But now, I've told not only myself, but a few other people that, you know what, it's not worth your time. What about this? Hot fixes issued for critical bugs. We've all seen it. We've all had to install patches on our machines at some point. Now, if you were lucky, it was a security vulnerability that wasn't exploited, and you caught it in time, and you're good. But what happens sometimes if you don't? Mass SQL injection attack targets Chinese websites. You don't want to make these headlines. They're not the good kinds. And what did it take? It took one security exploit that led to a mass attack on your software. So what if you could catch these security issues before your hackers do? And what if you could catch the critical bugs before your devs check in? And that's what I'm here to talk about, how you can use the code analysis tools early in your development lifecycle so you can catch the bugs before they make headlines like these. So for that, I'm going to be talking to you about a few things. What are the benefits? Why should you care? What are the types of issues we can help you with? How do you integrate it into your team's workflow? Better yet, I'll show you a demo. Once you're set with code analysis, how do you expand and configure it for your own team? What are the best practices? I'll share with you some of the ones we use at Microsoft, and leave some time for Q&A at the end. Driving quality upstream. Many of you have seen this before. It's a very simple chart saying, the later you fix an issue, the more expensive it is. Now, ideally, the devs would check in no bugs. Code would be bug-free. But in my experience as a tester, it's not always like that. So let's say a bug does get introduced. What happens then? If you're lucky, a tester catches it the next day and gets it back to the dev fixes it, gets back to the test, you're all good. What happens if the test gets it a month later? The same bug takes longer for the dev to fix because it's going to have some context switch. Now, what if the bugs actually escape into the wild and they're released? The cost can get astronomical. When I was in college, my software engineering professor told me, you should drive quality upstream. You should do code reviews. And that's great. That's true. You should do code reviews. That's also costly. We're not a substitute. We are an addition. And we'll help you catch more bugs, especially some that code reviews miss. So in this picture, where do we fit in? We help you catch the bugs before your devs check in, getting you one step closer to the ideal world where, well, bugs don't get checked in the first place. So to talk about security. I mean, I don't really need to. I cannot emphasize that enough. Everyone here knows it's critical. In fact, it is a hacker's world out there, and their only job is to make sure they find bugs with your code. Think about the cost. Microsoft estimates about $100,000 for a bulletin to be released. Think about the reputation. Brand is long-lasting, and one single mistake can leave a lasting impression. Some of you may remember the 2003 blaster worm that infected millions of computers. The call volume at Microsoft was so high that employees volunteered to receive some of them themselves because they just could not catch up. I was on one of the calls myself, and I had customers being very frustrated, very angry, and rightly so. The machines kept rebooting on them. They didn't know what to do. And they were looking for any other alternative product that wouldn't have the same issue that they were seeing right then. It's difficult. It's important. The Secure Windows initiative at Microsoft has a requirement that every shipping software is code analysis clean. They have a whole secure development lifecycle in place. And you can learn more about that in the booth at the pavilion in the big room, which ranges from all sorts of security practices from the requirements phase all the way up to release. And code analysis is an important part of that. Take a look at some of these numbers. Before the SDL was in place, these were the number of security bulletins released for Windows, SQL, and Exchange. And these were after. SQL Server and Exchange Server went down to about 2, 3. Windows went down about 60%. The pre-SDL was Windows 2000, and after was the Windows Server 2003. It's a huge security target. And we're not done. We want to get all the way down to 0. But these numbers are encouraging. And code analysis plays its part in keeping it that way. Some more recent numbers for Windows XP, SP2, and Windows Vista. We are still improving and will continue to do so. So let me show you an example of what types of security issues code analysis can help you catch. Let's take a look at this function. It's a very simple function. You have a buffer. You pass it to printf, and you append the message to a log. In fact, it's even a diligent developer using safe APIs and passing in the size of the buffer. What could possibly go wrong? Code analysis tells you that you have a buffer overrun. And you know what? In fact, you passed in the size of the buffer, but that was exactly a problem. swprintf expects the number of characters, the number of elements in your buffer, and not the size in bytes. Subtle mistake, easy to miss. Code analysis will help you catch that. Let's take a look at another example. Classic textbook SQL injection attack. You have a SQL query that's taking in a parameter, username, and I'm just going to look up the contacts and display it in a list box. Now, if you notice, we are using the parameter, and if it's user input, all sorts of evil things can happen. You can maliciously manipulate the input to gain access to your database, tables in your database, confidential information, login with elevated privileges, and all sorts of evil things. Code analysis will warn you and tell you you have a SQL query that is using a parameter, and if, you know what, it comes from user input directly, you could be in trouble. So review your query and use safer coding practices such as parameterized queries or stored procedures. Like in this example, we're using a parameterized query. So we talked about security. Anybody familiar with these dialogues? I can hear someone say, oh, not again. Well, security is very critical. But that wasn't what led to the flaky reviews of the product in the beginning. You want your application to be robust and reliable and of high quality so users can actually use it. Let me show you an example of how code analysis can help make your applications more reliable. Here, I have a simple application. It's a calculator. I get my operands, and I display the result to the user. I've overridden 2 strings, so if the user types in 2 plus 3, I'm going to say, well, that's 5, and show it to you. Easy enough to understand, easy enough to use, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the code. I'm going to say, you know what, I have my operands, and I'm going to give in my operator, which, by the way, is a valid enum, and 2 times 3, display it to me, 6. Not quite. What went wrong here? It was simple enough. If you take a look at this code, what is it doing? It's an override of toString, but it throws a not implemented exception. Now, as a caller of this code, I did not expect toString to throw an exception. I could have wrapped my toString call in a try-catch, but I certainly didn't need to. And I certainly did not expect to. So code analysis in this case will tell you that you are using bad design practices, and you should not be throwing from a method like this. What could you have done instead? Well, return unknown, have debug assert statements. It's much better than your app crashing. You could use this unknown later to display an error to the user saying, I don't understand this operator. Can you try again? It's better than the crash. Let's take a look at another example. Simple function again. I'm tracing information. I want to print out the messages if, say, my trace level is set to verbose, or I have a total number of messages that's greater than 100. And that's what I'm exactly doing. If my trace level is greater than 3, which will probably be verbose, and my total messages is greater than 100, I print it out. Simple enough. What could go wrong here? Say at the time this function was written, trace level was passed in by a parameter. But now some dev comes along, teams change, and they say, you know what, our logging is really great. And I always want my trace to be verbose. So I go and define it to 4. And I say, yeah, I'm great. I want to print them out all the time. But what happens? Well, you come down to your if statement. If trace level is greater than 3, if technically saying if 4 is greater than 3, it is, and it always will be, print the message. But that's a non-zero constant, and it's ORed with an expression. That's a short circuit. And if you look closely, your right-hand side of the expression has total messages being incremented. That part's never going to get executed, and you'll never see total messages being incremented. In fact, if you notice more closely, your total messages is passed in by reference. So someone out there is using the value and trying to figure out why is this not being incremented. Code analysis is going to warn you and say, you know what? You have a non-zero constant ORed with an expression. And if your expression has side effects, it'll never be evaluated. What can you do? Well, increment it outside and use the variable as it is. Trace level, for this purpose, I'm still going to say we might have it defined by a parameter, but it's always better practice not to have side effects in your expression. Let's talk about maintainability. We all know the more maintainable your code is, the easier it is to fix bugs in it, and the more efficient your whole team is. Let's take a look at this code. Are you guys trying to read it? I was too. And it's probably saying open file. I'm sure it's file. Dialog. It's a folder browser dialog. I am sort of stumped at RTB. I would probably do searches using my search engines, but it didn't help. Ultimately, I figured out it was a rich text box, but it took me a while. And the point is, at this point, I'm playing guessing games with my variables. I'm not focusing on what the code is actually doing. I'm focusing on what is it about and what is the naming of it, right? You run code analysis, it's going to say the same thing. Go, correct your spellings. Some of you may think it's not that big a deal, but ultimately it is. This is a real MSDN sample, and as I was reading it, it occurred to me that this is so easy to read. It's very clear what the variables are doing. I can actually focus on the algorithm of the code as opposed to, again, playing guessing games. This is one design guideline. Brad Abrams and Christoph Scherlina have a really great book out there for Microsoft Best Design Framework Best Design Guidelines, and they even had a session. And it's an awesome resource. Lots of best practices and what you should do. And I want to remember them all. I want to use them all. I usually even have a great memory. But you know, sometimes I just can't remember it all. FXComp is unique in its ability and analysis to make sure you conform to the best design guidelines. In fact, when I came out of college and I was using FXCOP on some test infrastructure code, it told me your dispose patterns are not implemented correctly, or your exception constructors are not fine. And I went to read it, and I actually learned a lot about the language through FXCOP. It makes me a better developer and helps me understand the mechanics of the language and how it's supposed to be used. So this is like, it was a personal code reviewer almost saying, you know what, this is where you went wrong, go fix it. So it really helped me in learning, and I've heard feedback from other people too saying that this is a great learning tool. And it'll help you enforce and adhere to the best design guidelines. So I've talked about some of the benefits. Just wanted to give you a flavor of what all we work on and what all we analyze. We have a lot of analysis for the managed languages, C#, VB, managed C++. For all the native programmers out there, we have additional analysis for native C and C++. And in VS 2010, we will also have analysis for SQL queries around, for T-SQL around naming, performance, and maintainability. So code analysis is great. I want to use it. How do I get my team set up for it? And that's what I'm going to show you in the demo. Let's switch to my demo machine. So in all your goodies that you're going to have, you have on your hard disk, you also have the CTP release of Visual Studio 2010. That's what I'm using for this demo. In it, you have a project called Dinner Now, which is a simple kiosk application for you to be able to order food. So here I am set up. I have Dinner Now, and I want to see the state of my code, and I want to run code analysis. How do I do that? For those using Visual Studio Team System or the Development Edition, you'll see an Analyze menu, which is sort of your launching point for all analysis of your code. So you click on Analyze, and you'll see a menu option for Run Code Analysis on the project. And when you do that, you will get results in your error list of code analysis, which will give you warnings and tell you this is what the state looks like. So I've already done this, and I have a bunch of warnings for my code. If I look through them, I see one for reliability. Let me take a closer look at it. And what it's telling me is that I'm calling an object, I'm using an object, and I'm not disposing it before it's out of scope. Now, we all are good about resource management, and like a good developer, I'm going to dispose of my objects before they go out of scope. So I have my reader. I'm going to wrap it in my using statement. And there. That was going to be one less issue that I need to worry about, and one more improvement I've made in my code by a simple fix, by understanding it. And if you think about it, when I read the violation, I'm like, oh, I need to dispose of it. And then if I'm not really familiar, I'll go read up documents of why should I, and I'll just learn more about it. So you can go through and fix all the ones you see. But often what happens is, in a legacy project, and if you've never run code analysis, sometimes you can get a lot of violations. And you really want to go and fix them all, but you don't have the time to do so right now. But you want to make sure, moving forward, the quality of your code is good. So what can you do? You can actually get into a known state by baselining. And what I mean by that is, so say for this example, I have a lot of violations. I want to baseline. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of them, and I'm going to suppress them into a separate file, so it's easier for me to keep track and work through the backlog, as opposed to if they were all scattered in source. So I can right-click, suppress message, in project suppression file. And what that does is inserts a whole bunch of suppressed message attributes into a separate file. I can add optional justifications. I can comment saying, this is my backlog, and I want to work through it. Now, the key is I want to work through it, and I don't want to just suppress all and be good. So I want to track my work. And how can I do that? So going back to the error list, what I can do is right-click and create work item. Create a bug. You notice the bug form opens up. The title is pre-populated. If you look at the history, you'll see a description of all the violations that were in your error list with the source location. You can add steps to reproduce, change the severity, priority. You can create one bug per violation. You can create one bug for multiple violations, however it is. But you will have this work tracked for you now, so you come back and fix this. But the point is, right now you're in a known state, so you can actually move forward and enforce better coding practices in your organization. So here, what I did was I ran code analysis, I got into a known state. And now I want to make sure that I stay clean moving forward. So what I can do is I can set up a code analysis check-in policy. And what that's going to do is, and the way I do it is I go to source control settings for my team project. I click on check-in policy, click on add, click on code analysis. It brings up the code analysis policy editor. You have many options for configuring what you want. You can enforce code analysis for native code, for managed code, and you can specify the settings of code analysis that you want. In this case, you will see in the drop-down, there are a bunch of rule sets. And this is a new concept in Visual Studio 2010. In Visual Studio 2008, all rules were run by default. And we got a lot of feedback saying, help me prioritize. Help me know what issues I should care about first. So what we've done is, in 2010, we've created rule sets for you out of the box, one of them being the Microsoft minimum recommended rules. And that's exactly what they are. They are focused on critical bugs, security, correctness, and reliability. They have a higher accuracy rate, so you'll get lesser false positives. So hopefully, this will help you to focus on the most critical issues of your code right now. So what you can do is, and that's what I want in my policy. I want to make sure everyone's clean on at least the minimum recommended. So I'm going to select that. Click OK. OK. And I'm set up with policy. So if I go and try to check in, it's going to warn me. And it's going to say, you haven't run code analysis, and your build is not up to date. So the things that code analysis policy will ensure for you are that you have run code analysis, that you have run code analysis with the right settings that I want you to run with, and you have an up-to-date and successful build. So it's great for making sure that the quality of code that gets checked in is good. So what I can do for that is go and enable code analysis as part of my build. So I click on Analyze, and you see an option for configuring code analysis for the project. And this is, in the project property pages, a pane for code analysis. So you can enable code analysis on your build, and you have the same rule set selector that will help you to choose the rule set that you want for your project. So let's see what I've done here. Just to get set up for code analysis in my team, I've run code analysis. I have gotten into a known state by either fixing everything or baselining. I've created work items where I wanted to make sure that the work was tracked for the future. I've set up my policy. And what you saw was, in the code analysis property page, you can actually enable it on build and save it as a configuration. And then when you create a team build, you will have code analysis enabled as part of that. And that's useful because, say you want to run only minimum recommended on your desktop, but you really want to know the overall state and what your code looks like for all rules, you can enable that in your team build and track progress as you go by and help build to build. So that's it. I'm set. I'm ready to go. I'm actually clean on my minimum recommended. My developers are good, and they're following all the rules. I want to go further. I want to kick it up a notch. What can I do? I want to become even better. So what are the ways that you can expand on code analysis? One of the ways is expand on the analysis set. I was clean on the minimum recommended. Now I want to do more. So how do we help you in choosing the rules that you want to enforce further? So going back to my demo, from the same property page, I click. You'll notice there is an option for choose multiple rule sets. You click on that, and that's going to easily let you pick sets of rules that you care about, instead of going and evaluating each rule and saying, OK, this sounds interesting, and this is the one I want to do. So from my add or remove rule sets dialog, I'm going to click on, well, I want to be clean on Microsoft minimum recommended for sure. And I want to be clean on the Microsoft basic correctness rules. So I'm going to save my rule set. And build. Now you notice I chose Microsoft basic correctness rule set, and that is a logical extension of the minimum recommended. So it's focused on the same types of issues. That's security, correctness, and reliability, and globalization. We have a lot of other rule sets, which are, some of them are security focused, some of them are design guidelines focused, and there's another one for globalization alone if you care about it. So here, back in my error list, I have more warnings. Well, yes, I do. I expanded the set that I was going to analyze. So going through it, I notice I have a few globalization warnings. For the purposes of my app, I'm not going to ship it outside. I just care about shipping it here. So, and I don't want this to get in the way of my developers. So I'm going to go and fine-tune my rule set. I want to switch off the globalization rules. And I can do that by, again, going back to the property pages. Click on Open. Search for the rule that you don't want. Deselect it, save, set, you're done. Now this is an advanced configuration UI for fine-tuning your rule set. You can do things like view the rules that are enabled, view the rules that are not enabled, elevate status to error if you really care about one and you want it to make sure it breaks the build. You can group by categories, names, expand, collapse, and all sorts of fun stuff to fine-tune and make it just right for your team. So I've done that. I've fine-tuned my rule set. I've got a rule set that's good for my team. The code analysis warnings were an indication of, how good my code is. What if I want another indication, right? I want to go expand further. I want to understand my code better. I want to know how maintainable it is, because that's going to help me focus on what I need to and let me know what the higher risk areas are. So I can just go onto my project. Again, my launching point for all analysis. Click on Analyze and click Calculate Code Metrics for selected projects. Now what that's going to do is bring up a code metrics result window where the commonly used metrics like class coupling, cyclomatic complexity, depth of inheritance are all calculated and rolled up into a maintainability index. I can view them by namespace, type, method, and what it'll do is it'll give me an indication of where I need to focus my efforts. If the maintainability is high, if it's more complex, I can take an assessment and see, OK, does it really need to be that complex? If not, refactor it. It's going to be easier moving on. If it really does need to be that complex, then I could do additional test coverage or more focused code reviews to make sure that I have the right focus on the areas of my code that are more risky. So here, I can check out the hierarchy, go look at namespace, method, type. I can filter on the ones that I really care about and see the results that I only want to see. I can export to Excel to do basic reporting. And just like in code analysis, if I really want to make sure that I track a particular red flag in my code, I can create a work item, and that will populate the details for me, and I can track that moving forward. So yes, I wanted to expand on my code analysis, and I wanted it to help me more. And here's what I did. I customized my rule set. I chose multiple rule sets and fine-tuned what I had. And I can focus on areas. Some people like to write custom rules for their organization. And they want to enforce their own style guidelines or their own coding practices. Before I get into that, just to give you a high-level overview of how your rules would fit in here, you have your source code, which is compiled into assemblies. We build an analysis object model out of that, and that's where the rules fit in. So it's important to note for FXCOP, rules are going to be written on top of MSIL. So any information that you have in source, that's, say, braces or coding regions, is lost by the time you write your custom rules. For Deft, currently we do not have an officially supported SDK. That said, we do have a vibrant community of rule authors out there, and we do our best to help. We are, oh, there you go, reboot. Should have run code analysis, you know. We are hoping to release it for Dev 10. We are working, there are a lot of things that we need to get through that we haven't yet, and we are pushing to make it of quality. So hopefully Dev 10, but can't make any guarantees yet. Can I switch to another one, or is it just completely? Oh, there you go. Has anybody here written custom rules with our existing SDK out there? Just one. OK, cool. That's one of the most requested features, and we really do want to get it out there. But we want to make sure that we are working on new technology, and we're writing our rules based on top of a new technology. So there are going to be breaking changes in the API. So one of the reasons we want to get it out there and early is so that people can try it and see how easy it is to port, and make sure you can easily do that. So moving on. Yes, we will be able to write custom rules to enforce my own coding practices. There's more. Not done yet. So for native programmers, you can annotate your source code. And what that means is you can document your assumptions and expectations. And code analysis tools will be able to leverage that information for better analysis. Let me give you an example. So by annotations, what I'm doing is I'm explicitly stating the contracts between the caller and callee and providing the tool more information about parameters and return values. So I have a simple function. It's adding a tail to the end of the linked list. And what it's doing is it creates a node. It goes to the end of the linked list. And it appends the node to the end and returns the list. So in my spirit of annotating, I specify saying, you know, the value of this parameter could be null. Well, code analysis tells me if the value of that could be null, you could be dereferencing a null pointer. That is, your app is going to crash. So what you want to do is you want to check for null and make sure you don't do that. Another annotation. My allocate node function is saying the return value could be null. So what happens then? Code analysis uses that information and finds a path where if allocate node returns null, you have another dereference of a null pointer. There, your application is going to crash. So you've just saved 2 crashing bugs using annotations for better analysis. So to wrap up, I want to share some of the best practices at Microsoft. Like I said earlier, you want to focus on the most critical issues. And we've helped you with that by giving you rule sets, and the one being Microsoft minimum rule sets. It's easy to kind of get lost in the noise and say, I have 10 violations, what's 2 more going to do? And it's hard to prioritize and say, just tell me what I need to focus on. So focus on the most critical ones. We've hopefully made that better. And dial it up from there. You want to keep improving the quality over time, so start small and dial it up. Get into a known state. Like I mentioned, if you already have 10, what's 2 more, right? It's hard to keep track. So what you want to do is fix, baseline, track work, however it is that you want to track your state and make sure that you're getting better and better. Use code analysis early and use it often. What we want to do is bake quality into the build as you're typing, as you're coding. And this is not one of those, I'm done coding, okay, now tell me what is code analysis going to do for me, right? It's not testing your code, literally. You want to have higher quality code to begin with. Prevent new issues. Like I said, set up a policy. You've done the work to get clean, so stay clean. Don't defer potential security issues. I sometimes think about it, or some people may. They're like, well, code analysis tells me this is a potential security issue, but is it going to be exploitable? I don't think so. Who's going to call this code? And you think it's not going to be exploitable because you just haven't spent enough time with it. Your hackers will. And it's just much cheaper to fix the issues before they get out. Enable code analysis in team builds. If you want separate configurations, if you want to run a different set of rules on your desktop versus your team builds versus your rolling builds, you can create configurations and set it up that way. If there's one thing you take away, that is the whole drive quality upstream, right? We do all these things so we have better code to begin with. There are some related sessions I want to point out. Some of these have already taken place. There is, just like we have annotations in native code, MSR is doing similar things with managed code, the contract checking, and automated test generation with PEX. Some of these, like I said, have already taken place, but be sure to go watch their recordings. We have hands-on labs. Please give us a try and send us feedback. For code analysis in particular, we have a CTP walkthrough that you can find on your start page of Visual Studio. So you just click it, find code analysis. We have a whole bunch of new rules released for the CTP based on data flow, so we'd love your feedback on it. And any other feedback, there are some links to blogs and forums. Please email me. We'd love to hear from you. And please fill out the session evaluation. And that's it, Q&A. We have a few minutes for that. Thank you. You can come up here. Yes, of course.
Okay.
Hello. Team system. Do I still have all the capability of code analysis?
Yes. So you have standalone tools.
Hi, I have a question for you.
Just to repeat the question I just got, the question was, if I'm not using Team System or Team Developer, can I still get code analysis? And the answer is that we have a few standalone tools that are out there for free. What you won't get is the workflow, like I was talking about. You will not get check-in policy. You won't get team build. You will get the rules. You won't get rule sets, but what you'll have to do is individually create the settings and and then analyze your code.
Is that for C++ as well?
Yes.
We have Team Edition on our server, and all the devs don't have it, so we still get all that information. So that works out good for us.
Okay.
We baselined.
I think.
Oh.
All right. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
We baselined our project, but I want to find out where that information is stored to go back and try to fix some of the ones that were baselined. Where's that information stored?
So how did you baseline your code? Through the. So the question is. The question is, I've baselined my code, and how do I figure out how to get back to that information? And my follow-up question was, did you baseline the way that I just showed you?
It was done by someone else. I'm not sure exactly how it was done.
Okay, so in the case that I showed you, what you could do, like it's simple enough to work back because all you have is suppression attributes. And if you just comment one out or delete one and you build, you're going to see it in your error list. And then you go and double click and you'd go back to your source that way.
Okay, but where's that information stored then? Is it in the
It's the suppression files is just part of your project. Yeah.
So I just want to know if, when you detect these things, do you suggest ways to fix them? I mean, Eclipse does that. So, for example, you're not disposing of it properly.
Yeah.
Can you just say right-click, surround with using? And
So some of them, the resolution or the suggestions will actually be part of the violation message. For example, the SQL injection one, we'll tell you to use, parameterized queries and such. For some others, no, the suggestion won't be as part of the violation, but when you click F1, you'll see lots of docs on how to do that and why it's important.
And does it actually do it automatically for you?
No, that is not something it'll do automatically for you, but we are investing in that, and there are things that it really just should, and we are looking at which those are and investing in such better practice, better experience for the user to just auto-fix the ones that make sense.
Yeah, I mean, not just at least give you the option to say right-click.
Yeah, that's in our future plans and high on the priority list. Thanks for the feedback.
What's your story around control at the solution level as opposed to the project level, right? Because if you have big enterprise apps, a lot of times we have one solution, maybe 50 projects in it, right? It means I have to go touch every single project if I want to modify my rule sets. Is there a way today that I could share like a global rule set across the entire solution? Because I really want to set that stuff like, it's the same story around like x86 and 64-bit.
Right. Are you using 2008?
Yep.
Yeah. So what you can do is for your solution, so you have 50 projects in your solution, right? We have an option to migrate settings to your whole solution. So what that does is if you have, say, a policy that's set up with so many rules, what you can do is it's again part of the file source control menu. You'd say migrate it, so just copy the settings throughout the solution.
Right. So
what we don't have, is a solution to share settings easily between team projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Hi, it's a follow-up on the earlier question about if you're not running the team system. What other tools out there? Can you name them or give the URI for those?
I can totally do that. In fact, can I give you my business card and you follow up with me and I can send you links to it. But if you just look for FXCOP and Prefast, you're going to find links for it. They're off PMSDN.
FXCOP has those templates for the security, but those are not, like, you can't really create work items and everything. So
yeah, you can't. For the whole team end-to-end experience, you do need team system or team developer.
Is there a command line utility that would let me get to a group of assemblies and give me all of the violations in the big old list?
Yes. It's called fxcopcommand.exe. With your Visual Studio command shell, you can go to fxcop command exe, and if you just type fxcop command /question, you'll see a help on the switches that will do that for you.
Will it allow me to pass in an optional rule set, or will it just give me everything?
Yes, it will give you, you can specify the assembly you want to analyze, you can specify the rule set, you can specify a directory that contains all the assemblies that you want to analyze, you can specify a directory that just has all your rule assemblies.
Thank you.
I have a question about Visual Studio 2008 versus the 2010.
if most of my developers are using 2008 with Team Foundation, right? And I want to come in with 2010 and run some of these more advanced things, is there any problem with me running this code analysis on 2010 and still putting items into Team Foundation?
No, you would be able to get the same. So in 2010, you have more rules and more analysis.
Right.
So that obviously people who are using 2008 can't get.
Right.
And if that's a work item that's stored, then you won't be able to say, I mean, you won't be able to repro that on your box because you won't have that rule on your box.
But I would be able to have it in the work item, though.
Yes.
Okay.
But you will have to be able to create the work item from 2010.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.